Hi, today we're going to talk about B2B versus B2C, and that's business to business versus business to consumer. Um, Let me just say this out loud. If you try to do both of these in the beginning, you're going to fail miserably. I know some entrepreneurs think that it's easy to go ahead and start a business, and they also think that it's easy to start going down the business to business route as well as the business to consumer route. And I got to tell you, they're in for a very difficult fall. Um, God warns about being double minded. And so I would say that if you could stay focused on one or the other, that would be your best bet. All right, let's start out. Just remember that God has called you into business, and you have to use your gifts and talents where He's called you. If He's called you to serve businesses, go ahead and do that. If He's called you to serve consumers, do that. But do one or the other and do them well. All right. Um, let's go ahead and talk about a few differences. All right, on the business side, here's a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need an employee identification number. You're going to need one here as well. All right. You'll also need some kind of business structure. This will be required from the business to business side. When I say a business structure, I mean that you need to be in the US. I'm speaking about the United States only. Sorry about this other countries. Um, you need a business structure like an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp or be a sole proprietor so that they know how to work with you. On the B2C side, the business structure is you need one, but it's not required. All right. You don't necessarily have to do a business structure when you're doing business to consumer. Remember, we talked about the hobby and the hustle. Well, some people sell at farmers markets and a few other places, and they're in business, so they don't need a business structure to sell at a farmers market. However, you should consider one. All right. Certifications here are not necessarily required, um, but sometimes they are. So you have to understand the business deal to understand if your certifications are required or not. I would say that when you start working in business to business, sometimes they do require you to have certain certifications in order even to do business with them. In this instances, this is still not required, but once again, recommended. And so, from a business to consumer side, it's not necessarily required that you get certifications. However, some people that want to do business directly with you may want you to have those certifications. Licenses and insurances. And we're talking about license, insurance, bonding, anything that protects you and your business um, may be required by a business to business. But on the business to consumer side, not always required, again, but recommended. These are recommended. And so as you start seeing why so many people go down the business to consumer route, because it just feels a lot easier, but it is highly recommended that you protect yourself and your assets. Um, let's look at a business bank account. A business bank account is more than likely required from a business to business side because depending on how the company does business with you, they may have to write a check to your business, not directly to you. And so you have to be able to put that into a business bank account. On this side, it's once again, it's not required, but highly recommended. It's highly recommended that you have some kind of business account that's separate from your personal account. Now, how the business will pay you is a little bit different as well. The businesses tend to pay people a little bit differently than than getting paid on the consumer side. Business to business, usually when they request work, I'm going to talk about requesting work first. They may require a purchase order, but on the business to consumer side, you may have to write an estimate. Okay, and how you ask for the money is on the business side, you ask them through an invoice, and on the business to consumer side, invoice is recommended, but not required. All right. The payment side, the businesses sometimes do ACH and or direct deposit, or they send checks, or they use electronic data interchange, or they use some kind of subscription service. These are all different payment methods that businesses use to pay other businesses. When you start looking on the B2C side, they deal with payment systems that take credit and debit. And then they also use cash. Now, you can take checks, but it's not recommended from a business to consumer side because you don't have a way to check on the check side. All right. Let's talk about location. The location is chosen between the businesses, but the location here is things on business to consumer is Amazon or Alibaba or Poshmark or eBay or Facebook or your website or a pop-up market or conferences or some kind of group. In other words, you have to be everywhere the consumer is. And that's what makes the business to consumer a little bit harder because you're going after these individuals one at a time. You're going after businesses in a larger way. And so there's more. Let's go ahead and talk about a few more differences from a business to business versus a business to consumer side. All right. You will need a website, and you'll need a domain, and you'll need an email address that fits that domain. On the business to consumer side, website is recommended, but not required. You also can use free email, but not recommended. It's not recommended that you use free email for your business to consumer, but it's widely accepted. And so a lot of people do that to save a few bucks. Also, let's talk about social media. Social media is not required. On the business to business side, but on the business to consumer, social media is highly recommended. As a matter of fact, a lot of people do most of their marketing or most of their crowd selection through social media, and this is their the strongest way that people use. And so you can see some definite differences in why people kind of shy away from either one. Let's talk about some of the results differences. I think that's important. We already talked about what they do and how they do certain things, but let's talk a little bit about some of the results. All right. From a business to business side, the pay is consistent. Or versus this, the pay is infrequent. So from the business to consumer side, the pay is infrequent. A lot of people that depend on farmers markets and pop-ups don't necessarily put those on themselves, so they depend on other venues to be around. You can try to sell your own website and try to do what Amazon and Alibaba and Poshmark does, but a lot of people don't necessarily know or hover around your one website, and so therefore a lot of the online strategies that people think that they can do themselves gets a little bit harder, and so the pay is sometimes infrequent. On this side, you need less time on social media. On this time, you need a high amount. The problem with spending a high amount of time on social media is that it takes a lot of time. and so if you're doing business to consumer and you really want to sell your product or service, when do you have time to do your product or service or build your product or service or get your product or service out if you're spending an enormous amount of time on social media? All right. On the business to business side, you get a higher dollar value, and I'm using US as the currency. Here you have lower dollar value. And I'm not saying that there are some people who do business to consumer with a high ticket item, but since it takes so long in between sales, then the cost to capture the person who purchases from you, it may take a longer time. So therefore your lead times are longer. So therefore the cost that you have to actually do the business is you get a less amount because you have to spend so much time of your own time trying to capture more people. Whereas when you get a contract on the business to business side, these individuals end up with a higher dollar value. Here you have faster growth, and here you have a one at a time. And so when I say faster growth, this means that you have a contract with a company versus you have to attain one customer at a time. Business to businesses has a higher success rate. And this, unfortunately, business to consumer has lower success rate. It doesn't mean that you don't do it. If you're called into this, you do it. But I just want to make sure that you understood that. And in both instances, it's easy to spread the gospel directly to business contacts, and you'll spread the gospel here directly to customers. In both cases, it's imperative that you keep the Lord in top of mind. Your message should be coupled with all the business components that you have or the consumer components that you have. And so it's important that you keep that top of mind. And I know this list was very long and there's a lot to do, but that's something that is part of your entire makeup as you go forward. Many people like the business to consumer route because it has less rules. It's quick to start. It feels good. Um, you can get affirmed on social media really quickly, and this type of affirmation feels good sometimes. But you have to also look at why do you need that affirmation in the first place, and that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in terms of remove the trash. There are some people who like the business to business route because it's more concrete. It has more stability and is more bottom line driven. Um, you don't have to think about the profits as much, and some of the business terms are all worked out for you. But sometimes this part can hinder your success as well, in terms of being bottom line driven so much that you may forget about some of the people. And so, on both instances, they have their things that can get in the way of our success we call trash. So, we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. Let's revisit our case study. And our case study is that Anayashe um, is our person that was doing business, and um, Anayashe decided to accept the Lord's calling to go into business. She could make cakes, and she was really, really good at making cakes. So she knew that there was a lot of work ahead, and so she decided to serve businesses as her business structure. She wanted to do B2B, and so um, she decided to talk to a restaurant owner and had a great conversation with him. He tasted some of the cake that she made, and they struck a deal. He said, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and try out these cakes at my restaurant." And so his name is Kukura, and Kukura um, uh, was excited so much that he invited her to sell these cakes on a Friday, that next Friday. So she went and started making 7 cakes that week. She went to the store and she bought all kinds of ingredients to make the cakes. And she, over the next few days, made 7 cakes at home in her home kitchen. She sliced all these up with their kitchen utensils, and then she decided to go ahead on that Friday, get everything ready. So she sliced everything up, and she bought these wonderful trays, and she put all the cake on the trays, and she said, "Oh, I better protect these cake slices." So she put some plastic wrap over the cake, and she was working from her gut, so she knew that that cake had to be protected. Um, that day, that Friday, she had all these nice wrap trays, and she brought them into the restaurant. And the restaurant owner said, "What are you doing? What's going on?" Um, Anayashe said, "I'm bringing the cakes here." And Kukura said, "You can't bring these here. I thought that you were going to have them in some kind of packaging." And to her dismay, he could not sell all 7 cakes because she failed to tell him that she really didn't have anything together. Um, and so she could not sell her cakes that day. She was so discouraged. What do you think that she did wrong? Well, first, let me just tell you this. She did not clarify the deal that they had. That's the first thing that she did wrong. And so, since she was so discouraged, Kukura said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay for the raw material that you had, but I can't pay for all the cakes at the rate that we talked about. Um, but let's do this. I will help you out a little bit later to help you understand what you need to be in business. And so she got encouraged by that. She knew that there was a lot that she had to understand, and so I say that as we start moving on, she will, as we start talking about her evolving, we're going to talk a little bit more about what does it mean to serve a business. What does it mean to really put a product out there to the consumers that's ready, and so that you can be ready. Okay. All right, that's it for today. Be well, serve well.